President Joe Biden is focusing his full first day as president on the COVID effort or the effort to distribute the coronavirus vaccine. So his response to the coronavirus and how different it's really going to be from the Trump administration. Now, what we're learning now is that the Trump administration left absolutely no vaccine distribution plan. I don't think that the Biden administration should be surprised by this, but they do say that they have to begin from scratch. So as CNN reports, they let the press know there's nothing for us to rework. We're going to have to build everything from scratch. And this is according to one administration source. Another source described the moment that it became clear that the Biden administration would have to essentially start from square one because there simply was no plan. And this person said, wow, just further affirmation of complete incompetence. But the reason why I say they shouldn't be surprised is because the Trump administration, of course, has been misleading throughout this entire pandemic. They were incredibly misleading when it came to the vaccine itself and whether we had reserves of the vaccine. So it turns out that they totally lied. They did not have reserves. So let's quickly hear from a Biden coronavirus advisor who spoke about that specifically.
We were quite surprised last Friday when we learned that, in fact, there weren't these extra doses of vaccine being held back for a second dose. Something that significant, only to find out last Friday, makes you very concerned that there's still more to be learned that you don't know that is going to create a real challenge as we go forward over the weeks ahead.
So just to remind you all, we passed a pretty devastating milestone with 400,000 Americans who have died from the pandemic. Also around 16.5 million vaccine doses had been administered by January 20th. And that is far short of the last administration's goal of administering 20 million vaccine doses by the end of 2020. So Operation Warp Speed has been anything but, and this is what happens when you don't have a centralized approach to distributing a vaccine in response to an international pandemic. Trump really left it up to the states, and that has been a complete and utter disaster.
You know what's so fascinating about this? Several things about this fascinates me. One, you mentioned at the top of the show the sort of panic that set in amongst people, Democratic Party voters, members, et cetera, when Donald Trump was elected, that somebody this obviously grossly incompetent, unqualified for the job is very dangerous. But what we saw for 3.5 years was that like the apparatus of the government is so huge and the boat is so big that it's going in one direction that it's pretty hard to throw a snag in it, right? Like Trump didn't do anything and it was fine until there was a bona fide actual emergency. And that's when Trump's incompetence actually, showed its effects, right? And so we see that in the response to the pandemic and getting out aid and help to people where Trump's lack of just his indifference towards doing the basic needs of the job cost so many people lives, got so many people sick, just ruined sort of everything. So I don't know that an incoming administration should be surprised by Donald Trump's lack of preparation or lack of planning for this. It's obvious if you were paying attention to his presidency that would be the case. What I would hope is that this incoming administration would use this as a way to tie this around the Republicans when they go around them to help everybody else, right? It's like these guys were in power for 4 years and they clearly did not care one way or another about helping people out, right? And so the idea that they need to come to the table with these same people who did absolutely nothing from April to right around the election, did nothing. They rushed in some little $600 thing because their arms had to be absolutely twisted to do it. And now we're supposed to believe that the incoming administration is supposed to share power and want to be bipartisan just for bipartisan's sake. It just doesn't, it baffles me. It doesn't make sense. I would hope that the administration will use Trump's example as an example of what Republican leadership on this issue actually is. They don't care.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. And when you take a closer look at some of the thinking among Senate Democrats regarding bipartisanship, like their insane willingness to kowtow to the desires of Mitch McConnell, right? But more importantly, look, Republicans are gonna Republican, like that's what they're gonna do, right? They know how to flex their muscle. They know how to just lie, not only to the American people, but to their own constituents, to their colleagues in Congress. They do it, and they do it with a straight face. It's not a problem for them. But what is a problem is that we just went through 4 years of devastating actions by congressional Republicans and by the Trump administration. At the same time, we had a lot of hyperbolic rhetoric coming from Democratic lawmakers, really pointing to how disastrous Trump's administration was, how disastrous the actions of Mitch McConnell were. And then after all of that, to come to us and say, well, we could use the power that we have right now, right? We could, throw out the filibuster in the Senate. You only need a simple majority for that. We could use reconciliation, to pass COVID relief through a simple majority. Instead of doing all that, they're like, no, let's just, Biden really wants us to approach this in a bipartisan way. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna approach it in a bipartisan way. We're gonna fail a bunch of times, and then what? Like this isn't some like fun patty cakes game. People are desperate for real economic relief right now. The system is broken and under-resourced, meaning that if you want to distribute the vaccine appropriately, effectively, you need funding for that. And that funding is wrapped up in the latest COVID relief bill that was proposed by Biden. Let me tell you something. That bill is not gonna pass if you're trying to play this bipartisan game with congressional Republicans. They're not interested in helping them pass anything robust. And so they need to understand the seriousness of the moment. They need to reflect on their own rhetoric over the last 4 years. And they need to prove that they were serious about what they were saying about the Trump administration and congressional Republicans. It's a very strange time for them to play these games. I get the need to want unity in the country, but the unity should be about creating a better country for people overall, so it's not easy for their anger to get exploited by fascists. That is a big problem. That's what Donald Trump did. He spoke to their economic issues, even though he wasn't actually being sincere about it. And what he did is he exploited their anger, exploited their rage to push all sorts of disgusting nationalistic narratives. And it worked. So if you care about division, the best thing you can do is pull the country out of the economic disaster that they've been experiencing, not just during this pandemic. I mean, the pandemic compounded it, but it's been going on for a long time now and accelerated after the 2008 economic collapse.
Yeah, it's the Democrats being Democrats as usual, right? I wonder to myself sometimes, you have to wonder, it's like, what is it really, right? How can you in good faith as a Democrat come out and say, well, we can't do this because what if the Republicans? No, there is no what if, we've seen it. We saw it with Merrick Garland. We saw what they did to jam through their ridiculous tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the country. Like, just try to imagine for 1 second that there was something as simple and easy as DC statehood. And Mitch McConnell had a place with millions of guaranteed Republican votes that would guarantee 2 senators in the Senate, 2 Republican senators in the Senate. And it was laying right there for him. And Mitch McConnell said, no, we can't do that, because then the Dems might do something. No, he would do just that. And he would know that the next time the Democrats would be in power, they would be cowed and be scared to do the things that hundreds of millions of Americans need, want, and are asking for, right? Nobody wanted that tax cut. And I know we're gonna talk about, how they're trying to go about this, but Bernie came out and he said, look, they use reconciliation for tax cuts. for the wealthiest people in the country, a minute percent of the population. Unpopular. That's what they went out and used reconciliation for. We're trying to get out money and relief and vaccines to people who desperately need it. Why not use reconciliation for that? And he's the only one saying it out loud right now.
Yeah, you're right. So we'll talk about that in more detail when we come back after the break. So let's do that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the discussions that are currently taking place among House Democrats and Senate Democrats regarding the possibility of passing a more robust version of economic relief.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.